consensus is a word that should never be used when we talk about prospects, just because teams look at these guys all just a little bit differently, both with how they play on the field, but also what, off the field as well. Just, personality wise, and medicals are a big part of it. Like, there's so many factors here. And this year, more so than probably most, it's a little more, up in the air with how some teams, how they feel. In my opinion, I think there's those two guys we talked about, Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter. To me, that's the 1-2. Like, that's the top tier. And then I think there's the next tier is about 10 guys. And then the next tier, that third tier, is about 50 guys.
Welcome to a very special episode of the Sharp Football Show. I am joined by Dane Brugler of The Athletic. And to most of you, this is just Wednesday, April 9th. But to Dane and most of the people in the NFL draft community, this is the Beast Drop Day. That's all you need to know. This is the day that Dane Brugler unveils pages and pages and pages of analysis of all of these prospects to help get everybody out there ready for the 2025 NFL draft. So, Dane, first of all, thanks for taking a little bit of time to come on the show to talk a little bit about your publication and some things that you have to share about the 2025 NFL draft. First of all, tell people where they can go to get the Beast, and let's talk a little bit about the background. How long does it take for you to prepare this thing and pull it all together? And what are people getting when they log in and get their hands on it?
Oh, thanks for having me, Warren. You're one of the few people that can understand what it takes to put something together this massive, this ambitious. The draft guide, it's when I started out, I've always, scouting was my passion growing up. It's what I knew I wanted to do in my career. And so to get with a team, I was like, okay, well, I need to separate myself. And so I'm going to create this draft guide that is as detailed as possible, as in-depth as you can get. And over the years, that turned it. I got into the media side, and over the years, it was like, okay, I kind of like this, where I'm not having to work for one team and one roster, one situation. I get to work for all 32 teams and do this from a general point of view, and I have a lot of fun with that. And so the draft guide the goal is the same every year. Make it the most in-depth draft guide that's available. And in this year's draft guide, there's over 2,600 players. A lot of those guys won't sniff the NFL, but you know what? There's other professional football leagues out there. There's testing information, NFL verified testing information for all of them. If you want to know a player's age and birth date, it's in there for my top 400 players. Of course, the analysis, the strengths, the weaknesses. There's just try to go as detailed as possible. The backgrounds for each one of these guys is a big part of it. So if you're a diehard NFL draft fan or just a casual NFL fan, there's something in here for everybody, and it's on The Athletic. This year is really cool because most people know it as a PDF, and you can still get it as a PDF. This year, though, we made kind of like a micro site for just the Beast. And so the navigation's really cool. It's easy to search for a player, or go by position. The search tools are really fun. And so it's mobile friendly. So you can do it from your phone, your tablet, or if you want to just download the PDF, you can do that as well. A lot of people get it printed out. So this year it's always been such a huge endeavor, but this year was even more so to make it more user friendly. Just want to make it, so everyone can enjoy it. And so it's out there. Hopefully people are enjoying it. Love hearing from everybody about it. And so I'm just very happy I'm able to share it after takes a full year. It's a calendar year, to put this thing together. And so very happy it's out there.
So that's definitely one of the enhancements you're talking about. This is now more of a micro site where you can still get it the traditional way if you're interested in that, but now you get a chance to go in there and click the links and go look at the players and search. And I'm sure that took a lot more time and a lot more effort from you and others to help get that endeavor completed. But it's sure going to pay off in terms of the ability to quickly access some of that information over the coming weeks as we head into the NFL draft. So you said that this takes roughly a year. It's a year-round process. So let me ask you this: in the fall, we're all eager beaver NFL fans. We're watching all the games. We tune into college as well, but Sundays are NFL days. Are you really focused on the NFL on Sundays? Do you watch the game like the rest of us do, or are you really digging more so into the college players even at that point in time and using some of that time on a Sunday to study some of these college guys?
Yeah, try to multitask because it's for my process. Yeah, Saturdays I'm watching games, just the broadcast copy, and then the tape comes in Sunday. So Sundays I have multiple TVs set up where I'm watching the NFL, and I'm obviously a huge NFL fan. I'm keeping track of what's going on across the league. But on my computer, I've got the tape. And so, I've got plenty of notes from the day before, just from the broadcast view, like, hey, check out this second down play from this game or whatever. And so then I go to the tape and I, go through a lot of the notes that I made the day before and start making, creating these scouting reports and going about it that way. But really, I mean, it starts. The big thing is in the summer for me because that's when, like, I try to take a few weeks in May to kind of catch my breath. But then around Memorial Day, I'm right back into it. And the summer is when I can really get a base, understand. Like it was around June 1st last year where I started watching Ashton Genty, a Boise State running back, for the first time, and I was like, okay, yeah, this guy's different. I mean, this is clearly the best running back in this class. And it wasn't consensus last summer, but I think people quickly got there after this past season started. So the summer's a big part for me, just to get that base down, understand, because you want expectations going into the year, understand, okay, this is what this player does well, this is maybe what he doesn't do well, and then going into the fall, the college season, okay, is he getting better? Is he improving on some of these things, or maybe regressing? And so having that frame of reference is really important. So by the time we get to January 1st, all the hay's in the barn at that point. All the tape's been watched, or most of the tape has been watched, and all the work's been done. And then it gets to all-star games, the combines, the workouts, and then taking everything, all that information, and compiling it into scouting reports and all the the numbers and everything like that. So try to make sense of it all. And you know what, this draft guide is, you might not agree. Anybody that reads it is not going to agree 100% with my rankings, and that's okay. I mean, that's the beauty of the draft is there's, two sets of eyes can see two different things. And that's what makes the draft fun to talk about, because it's not cut and dry. There's a lot of different ways you can project these players. Sometimes they go to a certain situation, they're one player. Go to a different situation, they're a different type of player. So it's fun to talk about these players throughout the process, because it's not as cut and dry as maybe we want to make it out to be.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. If this was so cut and dry, then all this analysis and all this pre-draft hype would be really blasé, because everybody'd
Yeah.
be saying the same thing and nobody would really care. That's why everybody is entitled to having their own opinion, but it's fun to track down the guys that are right more often than they're wrong, the guys that have the acumen to put in the work. So clearly, you do that year in and year out, and it's so exciting to have you join us here to talk through some of these players on the day that your guide drops. So make sure you guys check that out over at The Athletic. Cannot recommend Dane's publication enough. As he said, I know what it's like to work for a long time putting together a publication, and you're so happy once it finally hits those shelves, so to speak, and people can start digesting it. So I'm sure it's a great day for Dane and the household over there. Dane, a lot of the people want to be discussing, where some of these guys are going to go in the draft. And one guy that I don't think we have to discuss where he's going to go is Cam Ward. So we don't have to spend a lot of time here, but just based on your study of Cam Ward, what are the Titans getting with this player?
Yeah, and I think at the combine, it became pretty clear Cam Ward is going to be the number one pick. It was just more, okay, are the Titans going to stick and pick, or could we see a trade, maybe the Giants or somebody else going up to get him? And I think if you would have asked me back then at the combine, would you have, if you're the Titans, would you accept this offer of a first and a third and this whatever to trade back? I probably would have said yes. Give me the picks. Give me a chance to completely build up my roster. But the more I think I've thought about it, I was like, you know what? I think the Titans are making the right decision here to stay at number one. And as long as you believe in the player, which all accounts it looks like they do, talking about Cam Ward, because what else is their avenue to a quarterback? They're in a situation where they take a second round flyer on Will Levis. So far, he hasn't done enough to really separate himself as I'm going to be a winner in the NFL. But with Cam Ward, you really like the potential. You think, okay, this is someone that can develop into a top 12 to 14 quarterback in the NFL. And that's what you're looking for. If you can get one of those guys, top 12 to 14, it's going to help you compete for the playoffs. Because once you get into the playoffs, anything's theoretically possible. So you want to get one of those guys. And I think Cam Ward has a chance to be one. You look at his background and, wing T quarterback in high school, goes to Incarnate Word. The former offensive coordinator at Texas Tech for Patrick Mahomes brought him to Incarnate Word, Eric Morris. Goes to Washington State for 2 years. And, people need to remember, too, that Cam Ward declared for last year's draft. He was ready to come out, probably would have been third, fourth round pick. He decides to go back, makes the right decision. NIL may be a factor there, but he was able to translate that into a number one overall pick with what he did at Miami. And is he a finished product? By no means is that the case. But you factor in, okay, he has the arm talent, his elusiveness in the pocket, very calm, cool demeanor to him, the way he operates. Scouts really praise him for they say among all these quarterbacks, he's got the biggest chip on his shoulder. He's probably the brightest of them all. So when you talk about the player, the person, the way he's improved every year, and the way you think he's going to continue to improve, he's still a younger player. He's only 22 years old. He'll be 23 here this summer. So you think that you're getting a ascending player who will continue to get better and better. And, you look at some of his numbers, not only just, passing yards and touchdowns and things like that, but he will push the ball downfield. 56.1% of his completions this year, over 10 yards. That was number one in the FBS. So this is a guy that will push the ball downfield. He can make guys miss in the pocket, extend plays. And then you just think the way he can work inside a structure and then outside a structure, there's a natural rhythm to both. And I think for the Titans, it makes sense they want to bet on that.
It was going to be a big upgrade. We've seen the Titans struggle at that position, both to find that starter since we lost Ryan Tannehill, more or less, and with the new staff trying to figure that out. So certainly makes a lot of sense. And I don't think that at this point, like you said, there's no real disagreement there. Where there has been some interesting discussion is at that number 2 overall pick. And we recently heard Adam Schefter kind of flipped a little bit after suggesting that we may not see him go number 2. We're now seeing a lot of steam that it looks like it's probably going to be Travis Hunter. At first, there might be some Abdul Carter. Now there seems to be, after that pro day for Colorado, a little bit more Travis Hunter discussion too. The Cleveland Browns at number 2. What do you think the Browns will do? And does that differ from what you think that you would do if you were in the same position?
And this kind of sums up the draft process, right? At one point it was like, well, the Browns have to take a quarterback. They're going to take a quarterback. And then it was Abdul Carter. And now it's Travis Hunter. And it's just that kind of sums up how, the talking points go throughout the last 3 months. And I'm surprised that it's even news that, Travis Hunter could go number 2 overall now. Well, he's the best player in the draft. Of course, the Browns are considering him. And, especially with a team like Cleveland, who, you look at that offense last year, dead last in offensive points scored, dead last in, third down conversions. They need offense. And obviously the quarterback situation very much in flux. But if they don't believe in one of these guys, which I totally understand if they don't, to draft a quarterback at number 2, if Cam Ward does indeed go number 1, I think the Browns would be definitely in on Cam Ward if he were on the board. But if he goes 1 like we expect, I think Travis Hunter is the best player in the draft. And there's certainly debate about where you play him and that whole part of things. Me personally, I think while I do want him on offense, I think in terms of maximizing what he brings, he's a full-time corner. I think he can be an elite corner in the NFL. And then you have a package of plays, 25 snaps a game, 8 to 10 touches a game on offense, where he's still greatly impacting what you do on offense. We don't see a player do 2 ways. It's not normal. It's not something we've really ever seen. But if there's someone that can do it, it would be Travis Hunter with what he did in college, the athletic ability that he has, the ball instincts are special. And I think there's some teams that want to just play him on offense. But if we really want to maximize what he brings, making him a full-time corner, part-time receiver, to me, I think that's theoretically, that also makes the most sense just in terms of workload between the week. Like it'd be easier to be a full-time corner and then have a package of plays on offense, as opposed to the opposite, where you're going to try and play him full-time at receiver, but then also work him in at nickel. It'd be tougher to do it that way. So every team looks at it differently, though, and that's the key. I think the Browns, they need help on offense in a big way. So I think they definitely would not want to lose that. If they draft Travis Hunter, it would be with the idea he's going to play offense in some shape or form for them, because it's such a big need as they try to remake that side of the ball. So in my opinion, that it would be the right move to go Travis Hunter. I think Abdul Carter makes sense. You add him and Myles Garrett, and you've got instantly one of the most feared pass rushing duos in the NFL. But the idea of adding more firepower to your offense has to sound appealing to that Cleveland team.
Right. So best player in the draft, as you mentioned, most talented player, Travis Hunter, likely going to the Cleveland Browns. Theoretically, could go is the way the tea leaves are shaping up right now. You look at the Cleveland Browns team, Dane. Last year, they had the least amount of draft capital available to them.
Right.
This year, they have the most draft capital. It's the most draft capital that they've had since 2018. And I went back and looked from 2015 to 2018 for 4 straight years. They have had the number one most draft capital in the NFL every single year. And they the results show that they squandered it. The results since 2019, after having 4 straight years of the most draft capital, 4 losing seasons, 2 winning seasons, and 1 playoff win in total since 2019. So they have to make this draft capital count for them. And one other interesting nugget that, just as I'm thinking about your answer to how the Cleveland Browns might go about using Travis Hunter, if you play him full-time as a DB, and then part-time on the offense with a couple of packages, those other teams that are preparing for your offense are going to have to spend as much time preparing for him offensively as they would if he was a full-time offensive player. But now he's also helping you on the defensive side of the ball too. So you're already getting those other teams to have to game plan for Travis Hunter when he's out on the field on offense, like they would if he was playing 40, 50, 60 snaps or 20 snaps. But then now they also have to deal with the defensive side. So it probably does provide a bigger positive situation for the Cleveland Browns overall in their matchups if he is playing a little bit both sides of the football there. So now we're at number 3, and we're talking about the New York Giants. And we're not going to walk through the top 32 picks in order here. We're going to start diverging a little bit, but this makes the most sense, I think. We're looking at the New York Giants. And specifically, I want to go back to their need at quarterback. And we've got Shedeur Sanders sitting out here, who is, I want to hear from you. Do you feel like he is clearly the second best quarterback in this draft? Is he worth the pick for the New York Giants at number 3? Do you think the New York Giants have their sights set on moving in that direction for Shedeur Sanders if he's available? Or do you think that they would pass by him? And if they do, then what is the floor? Where does Travis Hunter drop to? Sorry, not Travis Hunter. Where does
Shedeur,
Sanders drop
right?
to?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I guess if I had to put an over under on it, I'd probably be 9.5. With the Saints picking there at number 9. But the Giants are kind of the wild card. No other team has done more work on Shedeur Sanders over the last calendar year than the Giants. And, Joe Schoen, he was in Boulder frequently. Saw him play live a few times. He was in Frisco for the East-West Shrine when they were down there, at the Pro Day, obviously. So the Giants have done a lot of work. And so they have a good idea of what Shedeur brings to the table. It's for whatever reason, it's become a difficult prospect to talk about, because it's either you love him or you hate him. And I don't think you just can't do that with quarterback prospects. There's just too much context involved. I like Shedeur Sanders. I think he can start in the league, but I wouldn't draft him at third overall. That's just my opinion. I think that there's a cap on maybe what his upside is at the next level. I think part of it is the way he likes to play, the way he wants to play. He doesn't really have the physical traits to back that up. And I think when you watch him against some Big 12 defenses, it can look great at times. But if you watch him against the 3 toughest defenses he faced this year, Nebraska, BYU, Kansas State, all 3 of those games, you could see how he struggled. And part of it, yes, the offensive line was terrible. The running game, almost non-existent. So it does put a lot on the quarterback. But at the same time, again, I think the way he likes to play, the way he wants to play, he just doesn't have, he's an average physical skill set. And you can win in the NFL with an average physical skill set, but it just becomes, okay, am I going to take that chance at number 3 overall? Personally, I would not. Now, maybe the Giants will feel differently about that. Because again, there's a lot to like about Shedeur. He's smart, he's tough, he's accurate. I don't think he's as accurate as 74% completions would say. I mean, he had more screen passes than most quarterbacks. 28.3% of his completions this past year were on screens. So I think that inflated the completion percentage a little bit. But there's still a lot to like about Shedeur, and I still think he can start in this league. I just personally, I would rather have go with a player like Abdul Carter if I'm the Giants at 3, and then try to find my quarterback elsewhere.
The good part is they've already got Russell Wilson, which in my opinion is the best quarterback that regime has had to work with, because they were given Daniel Jones to start when they got there, and then they ended up extending him, and they had these other quarterbacks come through. And I think even current day Russell Wilson, I could go down in flames for this opinion, but I think current day Russell Wilson is still better than Daniel Jones, having studied Daniel Jones to the degree that I did that season that they went to the playoffs. I think Russ can still do more for them than he was able to do at that point in time. Let me ask you this real quick. That the issue of the ball pat, we saw Darius Slayton come out and talk about the fact that, hey, there's no problem with the ball pat. Then we saw Micah Parsons come back and say, hey, the ball pat's an issue that could turn a potential completion into a sack or an interception. What is your take on, like, how frequently we saw him do that in the drop back video, where at his pro day, pretty much before every attempt in that video, he did pat the ball? Issue or no issue in your opinion?
Less of an issue than I think people are making out to be. My bigger issue with him was more the drifting. He does that quite a bit when you watch him on film. He will drift in the pocket. Like we said, the offensive line is not great. What was not great at Colorado, but some of those sacks were on the quarterback because he would drift. He would almost go in reverse, and the tackle has no chance to because he doesn't even know where the quarterback is at that point. So more so than patting the ball, it was some of the drifting and just being more consistent with his reads after that first read was taken away. If that quick game is not there, so I think it's a little more overblown. But there are some other areas of his game when he's in the pocket that I think he needs to button up and get a little bit better at.
Okay, so if we move beyond the top 3 in this draft, and obviously we got Shedeur falling a little bit more, is there anybody in the top 10, sort of the consensus? I know there's not actually a consensus. This draft is more up in the air. I don't know. How does this draft feel to you in terms of the consensus out there, the top 10, top 32 players? Is it much more variable between different scouts and different talent evaluators than it has been in some other drafts?
Yeah, no doubt. This is a draft where there's a lot more differing opinions, and it's funny. I think if player A is drafted 10th overall, he'll go down in history as being a top 10 pick. That might be the only team in the NFL who would have drafted him that high, but he will go down as a top 10 pick. And so, it's consensus is a word that should never be used when we talk about prospects, just because teams look at these guys all just a little bit differently, both with how they play on the field, but also what, off the field as well. Just, personality wise, and medicals are a big part of it. Like, there's so many factors here. And this year, more so than probably most, it's a little more, up in the air with how some teams, how they feel. In my opinion, I think there's those 2 guys we talked about, Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter. To me, that's the 1-2, like that's the top tier. And then I think there's the next tier is about 10 guys. And then the next tier, that third tier, is about 50 guys in terms of being similar in grade and where you have them on the board, where most teams have them on the board. And so it gets interesting at that point where, after we get past some of those, we know, Mason Graham, defensive tackle from Michigan, we know he's going to go somewhere probably in that top 10 area. A couple of these other guys we know are going to go high. But, we have 2 tight ends at the top of this draft, where tight ends don't usually go in the top 10. So how are teams going to react to that? The pass rushers in this group are talented, but they all have something about them that's maybe just a little bit different where, a Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, freaky athlete at 6'4", 275 pounds, but he didn't have more than 1.5 sacks in any of his seasons at Texas A&M. So how, different teams will look at that a little bit differently with the production issue with him. Mike Green from Marshall, yeah, he did most of his production, which was a lot of it. Most of it came against Sunbelt competition. Also, some off-field stuff with him that some teams are more comfortable than others. So I think that position by position, there's something that you look at the top of this draft, and every team looks at it a little bit differently, which, from my standpoint, is can be frustrating at times when you want to talk about these players and where they're going to go. Like I'm the quote unquote expert. I'm supposed to know, but the truth is, it's going to be a fun draft night because there's a lot of these things that we just don't know because teams are going to look at these players so differently. And trades, obviously, that'll mix things up. But just the players themselves, the wide receivers are ranked differently from team to team. From T-Mac from Arizona, some teams like Golden, some teams don't believe any of these receivers are worth a top 20 pick. So there really is a wide range of opinion when we talk about the top 15, top 20 of this draft.
So I think it's going to be great that the draft is a little bit unpredictable this year. But I won't ask you who you think is going to go in the top 10. I'll phrase it to you this way. You said that there was a couple of different tiers up there. You obviously have your Cam Ward, and then you've got your Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter. Beyond that, you said there's like a next tier that's about 10 players. Is there someone in that tier for you that you think might be a little bit higher on than most other people could be from what you've just heard in the public? It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go in that top 10 to 12 range, but it's just a prospect that you think deserves to be in that tier that maybe other people aren't talking about quite as frequently.
Well, I think so. Mike Green from Marshall, who I mentioned, he's a player that I've been higher on than most throughout the process. And you look at his production and what he did. He led the FBS in sacks with 17. He was very high in terms of tackles for loss. But not only that, but he led all defensive linemen in tackles. He had 84 tackles this year from a defensive end, which shows a lot. It shows effort. It shows ability and talent. And yes, he did play at the Sun Belt, but a lot of what he was doing, it showed up against Ohio State. It showed up at the Senior Bowl against, theoretically better competition. So his twitchiness as an athlete, the burst, the body control, he can win one-on-one as a pass rusher. And I think he is better in the run game than he gives credit for. Yeah, he's a little bit undersized compared to what you ideally want as an edge setter, but he's very violent. He has strong hands. And so as long as the character checks out, and that's a part of this, as long as the character checks out, which for a lot of teams it has, I think he's a player that if he goes top 10, it shouldn't be too surprising because of the juice that he brings off the edge and the way that he can upgrade a team's pass rush.
Interesting. Okay, so that's one to note, Mike Green. Speaking of the draft and invites, we saw last year 13 players were invited to the draft. All 13 were drafted in the first round. The year before that, there were 17 players that attended the draft. 13 of 17 were drafted in the first round. And the year before that, 2022, we saw 21 prospects invited. 17 of 21 were drafted in the first round. So each year they've invited fewer and fewer players, but higher percentage, especially last year, all 13 were drafted. We just saw Jalen Milroe was invited to the draft, accepted that invitation. He's going to attend the draft. Do you think he goes in the first round? And then based on your evaluation, do you think that he develops into a starter in the NFL?
Yeah, he's a wild card on draft night because he certainly has love in the NFL. There's no doubt about that. But to draft him in the first round, that's tougher because what's the landing spot? Would the Steelers draft him at 21? That feels rich. Could we see a team, say the Browns and the Giants both pass on a quarterback at 2 and 3? Could we see them trade back into the first round for a quarterback, whether that's Jalen Milroe or Jackson Dart or whoever? Certainly an option on the table. Like you mentioned, the Browns have a lot of draft capital. I think they need a lot of that to kind of rebuild that roster in the post Deshaun Watson era. But, if you feel like you love the quarterback, then go and get him. I think that there's a better chance we will see Jalen Milroe available on day 2. And it's more because he's he is still very raw in a lot of areas in terms of pocket feel, reading out the defense. He has the ability to do it. It's just it's been very inconsistent. And you watch him against Wisconsin, you watch the tape against Georgia, and you're like, okay, I can get on board with this guy. But then you watch him against Oklahoma and some of these other tapes, and it's like, all right, there's something, it's just it doesn't look the same. It's way too inconsistent. But as an athlete, he's tremendous. I mean, he is explosive as an athlete. He really just destroys pursuit angles with that speed, and it's instant speed. It's not build up. It's right away, smash the gas pedal, and he's gone. He has an arm, and he's a smart guy. I mean, the interviews I think have gone well. That based off what I've heard with teams, he won the academic Heisman this year. So we know he's book smart. We know that he's a very smart individual, and the interviews have gone well as well. So I think he's connected well with teams. So what does that mean for where he's going to end up on draft night? That's a good question. I mean, I really, it's tough to get a great feel for where he could go. I think it'll probably be somewhere in the second round. But him accepting that invite to the draft really spices things up and makes things interesting. But you know what? We've seen, Malik Willis accepted it, and Matt Corral. Yep. Both of those guys were at the draft. They went in the third round. Drew Lock was, he didn't get drafted in the top 40 pick. So, I mean, we've seen it before, and I think it's about managing expectations. Like, I think Jalen Milroe knows, like, yeah, it'd be cool to be a first round pick, but I think he probably knows, and his representation knows, there's an outcome here where I'm not a first round pick. And I think he's okay with that because, I get to go to the draft. I get to go to Green Bay, this legendary place for football, and, with my family, and really enjoy it. And if I don't get drafted until pick 52, then so be it. Like, I don't think it really matters to him. So, we'll see how it plays out. But like I said, I think there's a better chance he goes second round than first round.
Yeah, and great point on some of those other guys that did not get drafted. When you talk about Matt Corral and Malik Willis in 2022, both were invited, both went third round. And then in 2023, we saw Will Levis not get drafted in the first round, get drafted in the second round. The quarterbacks that were invited last year were Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Drake May, all three of which were, viewed as first round quarterbacks, and all three obviously went near the top of the draft. So it's less likely that Jalen Milroe fits into that same mold as those other three, and more likely that he's there, kind of like you said, is it's a no-lose situation for him as long as he has the right perspective on it. But it's also something that the analysts can talk about all throughout the first round is, will somebody come back into the first round and draft Jalen Milroe? And they'll show a live shot of him, and more so for some TV production rather than them thinking that they have an insight that he's definitely going in the first round. So we will end up seeing about that.
I'd say that's the point. Like, the NFL is putting on a TV show here,
Right.
The chance to have a player go on the stage on day 2 is not the worst thing for them. Like, and I think as long as they don't have the cameras on Jalen Milroe starting with the 5th pick, like that's totally fine. Remember with Aaron Rodgers and Brady Quinn, like they had the cameras on those guys from the first pick until they were drafted. So it made it seem a lot worse, where with a guy like Jalen Milroe, who's not expected to be a top 5 pick, I don't think the cameras are going to be zeroed in on him maybe at any point during the first round. Who knows? So it'll be something that maybe doesn't seem as bad if he's still on the board on day 2 because of the way the production part of it is on TV.
Now, you mentioned this year the consensus is a bad word to use, but it's all over the place with so many of these prospects. So let's focus on that running back class, which we talked about briefly at the top when you mentioned that you put on the tape of Ashton Jeanty around Memorial Day of last year, and we're blown away by him. Beyond Ashton Jeanty, we'll compare him to some others in a moment, but the next 4 or so running backs, that top 5 group, where do you think that top 5 group is? Like, how would you rank those running backs, maybe 1 to 5 right now? And do you think that a lot of people share that same sentiment, or do you think that there's guys that might be the 4th guy on your board that somebody else has way down at 20th, and it's just such a wide varying opinion on the running backs this year because it is such a deep class?
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it right there. Like, there's a lot of teams that look at these running backs very differently, and understandably so. I mean, it's we talk about receivers in the same conversation, but large, a good sized athlete who's an X is very different than a smaller receiver who's a slot. Yeah, they're both receivers, but they're very different with what they offer. So, it's the different positions within a position. And same thing with running backs. Some guys are true all around backs, and that's your Ashton Genties. I think Omarion Hampton from North Carolina fits in that mix as well. Other guys are more maybe a little scheme specific. My third running back after those two is Caleb Johnson from Iowa, but he's someone who really thrives in that outside zone. And so certain teams are not going to value a Caleb Johnson as high as others because of the scheme that he thrived in college and where he projects at that next level. When I watch Caleb Johnson in that zone, I say, oh, this is DeMarco Murray. How big he is, the size, but also his ability to glide, see where the hole is, cut through it. It's just very natural for him. And so Caleb Johnson in the right fit, like he might not be the third running back drafted, but if he's not, I think part of that is because of where the teams that are looking for a running back in round 2 and the scheme that they run. The 2 Ohio State running backs would be next for me, Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, 2 guys that offer a little bit different skill sets, but are both explosive in their own kind of way. Travion is, you try to get him in space first and foremost. Like that's between the tackles, it gets a little muddy in terms of him working through some of that, some of the tempo and patience. It's off at times, but if you give him a clear hole where he can hit it and be in space, good luck, because he has that acceleration and he can make guys miss at the second level. Quinshon brings a little bit more power element to the game, but what you like about both these guys is they can catch the ball in the backfield, they can pass protect. And obviously, we know that's something that teams really care about in terms of getting rookie running backs onto the field. They have to be able to trust you in any situation, third down, pass pro, whatever it is. And I think, all 5 of those guys kind of bring that. And so, but like I said, it's the running back rankings are all over the place. Quinshon Judkins is a little bit lower for some teams. You got Dylan Sampson from Tennessee is higher for other teams. I'm a big fan of Jordan James from Oregon, who is not a big home run hitter, but he might lead the league in singles and doubles. I mean, he's not going to get you 60, but he'll get you 6 consistently. And so those guys have value, certainly. But it's going to be interesting because the biggest reason to not draft a running back early is you can wait till the 4th round and feel great about your options at that point in the draft. This year I have 30 running backs with draftable grades. Are we really going to see 30 running backs drafted? Probably not. And so you feel great about 3rd round, 4th round, probably even into the 5th round of some of your options that will be available. And so that's going to make it really interesting. Just how early do we see teams go after these running backs when they know, hey, maybe we should get we could wait. So let's maybe get our tackle here or a corner here. So it'll be interesting how teams, how do they balance that where they feel comfortable going to get the running back?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're saying you had 30 running backs this class that have draftable grades. How does that stack up to years past the running back classes? Is that the most that you've seen since you've begun doing this?
Yeah, it's pretty high. I mean, it's usually we're talking about between 22, 25, 26. I mean, and honestly, I probably could have done a few more. I mean, it's just a loaded running back class that are true, right, draftable guys. And they're all different. One offers more of a third down skill set, one's more of a between the tackles power guy. I mean, they're all bring something a little bit different, but it's just a loaded group, and it'll be interesting to see how many actually get drafted. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see some teams even double up with a few of these guys, because at some point it's just like, okay, I can't pass on this guy again. We have him graded as a 5th round pick. He's still available here in the 7th. So some of these running backs are going to go a little bit later than maybe we project, just because there's the sheer volume of the guys available.
Right. It's a little counterintuitive for some people to think about that way, but that's exactly the way that it typically works. With Caleb Johnson, interesting fact about him at Iowa, they don't disguise what they're doing offensively very much. And he faced 7.1 or more he faced 7.1 box defenders on average. That was the second most of anybody in this class. Only 28% of his runs came versus light boxes. That was the lowest in this class. So he was given a tall task of just the defense thinks you're running, you are going to be running, figure out a way to still try to make it work. And then when he did get those spots where he was getting those lighter boxes, he was making just big time gains. He averaged 9.8 yards per carry when he did face a light box, which was the best of any running back in this class. So you've got him as your RB3. Simple question, over under number of running backs that go in the first round. Just if you had to flip a coin right now, where would you fall on that?
I would say it's probably 2.5, and I would probably take the under just because I think a lot of some teams would love to have Travion Henderson, but should we really take him in the first round when we know we feel great about our options in the third round? Like, let's get our corner here. Let's get our pass rusher here. Positions that maybe don't stretch as much. So I would lean the under, but it's a loaded class for a reason. So at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised. And yeah, I mean, to back on what you said about Caleb Johnson, yeah, Iowa ranked 130th out of 133 teams this year in passing offense. So I think that's exactly right. The amount everyone knows in the building knows what's happening, and still for Caleb Johnson to be as productive as he was, like I said, outside zone, anticipate that backside, that front side lanes, really, really natural at it. And so if he goes to the right spot, I think he'll be a natural.
So the Dallas Cowboys right now, they're picking 12th overall, a team you have a little bit of familiarity with. Public perception thinks they're going skill, running back, wide receiver. Is that where you also believe that they might fall here, is going after a skill position?
When the Cowboys pick in the top 15, top 20, they don't target positions. They target players. Okay. And so I think now with that said, I absolutely believe that Ashton Genty, T-Mac from Arizona, Matthew Golden, I think all three of those are on their short list. And to their credit, the Cowboys have been one of the best drafting teams in the top 25 over the last 15 years. I mean, you think about from CeeDee Lamb to Tyron Smith, I mean, on and on. A lot, Zach Martin, a lot of really good picks in the top 25. Some of those misses have been when they've had those late first round picks, you know, the Taco Charlton and those guys outside the top 25. But they usually hit on those early picks, and so. Will any receiver still be, or will any receiver be off the board at that point at number 12 overall? Or will they have the chance to draft their top receiver, whoever that might be? That'll be kind of an interesting storyline I'll be looking forward to with the Cowboys. But they need help at corner. They need help on the defensive line. But right now, I would lean if T-Mac is there, McMillan from Arizona. I think that makes a lot of sense for them. You pair him and the way he would fit with CeeDee Lamb, I think makes a lot of sense. You're helping your quarterback. By extension, you're helping your run game. So adding a talent like McMillan would make a lot of sense for Dallas.
So speaking of McMillan, aside from Travis Hunter, how do you rank the top, 2-3 receivers after that? Is McMillan the best, T-Mac, or how would you rank him? And then where would he rank last year? Like with last year's class, how do you think he might have fit into that discussion?
Yeah, and obviously this class is not last year. You know, we had Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors, Roma Dunze, all go top 10, and they would be the top 3 receivers in this draft. Let's just say Travis Hunter's a corner for this conversation. Yep. With McMillan, he's a little bit of you have to really, because I think for me the comp is T. Higgins. And, you have to, because he's the 40s average, not great. He's a guy that wins with ball skills and catch radius and the ability to go get the ball. And that's where you kind of run into some problems sometimes with projecting those types of guys, because in the NFL, there's a big jump up from the corners he faced in the Big 12 to what he's going to face in the NFL. So a guy that doesn't rely on creating separation, that is a little bit of a leap of faith with a guy like this, but he is so good with the ball in the air that I'm willing to take that chance. Same thing with like a T. Higgins type. I'm willing to bet he turns out more like a T. Higgins than a Laquan Treadwell or N'Keal Harry, guys that weren't big separators. They won with their body and the ability to win at the catch point. But with McMillan, I think it's just a little bit different because he's so wide-ranging. He's so limber with the way he attacks the ball. He's always working back to the ball. You rarely see that ball hit his chest. He's always catching the ball away from his body. And he can just do it. It looks so effortless for him. It's very natural. You see his basketball background, his volleyball background. I think it really shows up. So now if we were to compare it to last year's, I personally, I really like Brian Thomas last year. I think he was my 14th or 13th player last year. So he would probably be just behind Brian Thomas in last year's class for me. And then I'd probably have Matthew Golden right there behind McMillan. Because this year it's, for me, McMillan, Golden, and then I have Burden and Ibuka third and fourth. And really the 3 and 4, I think it just depends on the type of receiver that you want. With Burden, he's more of the yards after catch, a little more upside there, where Ibuka, maybe not great at anything, but he's good across the board. He's more of a pro right now. You know what you're getting. A little more of a higher floor pick than Burden. Burden might have the better ceiling.
So this class, we've got a little bit more question marks with some of the people, less consensus. When you have that type of situation, maybe you've seen that we get some surprises towards the end of the first round with guys sneaking in. Who are some of the guys that you think the NFL as a whole might be higher on the public than public perception, you included, that could sneak into that first round at the tail end? We could hear their names called off opening night of the draft.
I think, and usually we see it at key positions, right? And I think that could be the case here with a guy like Ariante Ursary from Minnesota, offensive tackle, 6'6", 320 pounds. He's a little unpolished, and he's late to the game. He's still developing. And so I think his profile, his tape says second round, but he plays offensive tackle, and we know all 32 teams need more tackle depth. And so I wouldn't be surprised if he goes in the first round. That wouldn't be too surprising. Edge rusher, another one of those premium positions. We talked about a few of them, and a lot of these guys are going to go in the first. With Abdul Carter, obviously, and then Shamar Stewart, Mike Green, Mikael Williams. But the interesting one is Landon Jackson from Arkansas, who is a little upright, a little stiff. But you know what? Those guys usually last. And, it might not look like Von Miller, but that's okay. I think if a team like the Bills at the end of the first round, I wouldn't be surprised if they went that direction, where, again, it doesn't look maybe as appealing to the eye as like a Von Miller does. He rushes the quarterback in his own way, but he had success against Will Campbell on that LSU tape. He had really success against a lot of the tackles he went up against, and he tested pretty well in terms of vertical and getting off the ball. So I think Landon Jackson could be one of those players that is mocked consistently in the second, but it wouldn't be surprised if he's off the board somewhere in that late first.
Okay, and you just talked about a tackle there. When we are looking at some of the offensive linemen, there's been some question marks about some of these guys at the top, whether it's measurements or injuries, or whether some of them can go outside and play well there consistently. Does anything stand out from any one of the prospects as specifically a particular red flag that you're picking up on?
Well, I think you can poke holes in all of these guys, right? I mean, Will Campbell doesn't have ideal arm length. I mean, whether you believe the combine measurement or the pro day measurement, based off of all the research I've done, and I tweeted this last week, but it's of all the offensive linemen who remeasured at their pro day after the combine, something like 42 of 46 had longer arms at the pro day. And so just for people that don't know how the process works, there's one scout who's doing the measuring at the combine, and he's a longtime scout. I'm not going to say his name, but I'm not going to put him on blast. He's a longtime scout. He's been doing this for a while. At the pro day, it's not the schools that are doing it. It's still NFL scouts who are doing the measuring. So I'm going to believe the wide assortment of different scouts doing the measuring at the pro days, as opposed to the one who maybe had a little bit of a different process with what he was doing. I don't know. I mean, we shouldn't have this problem, plain and simple, right? But it is what it is. Teams are going to take the longer measurement. That's just, and I had one scout say, it depends if you like the player or not. If you like the player, you're taking the longer measurement. If you don't, you're going to take the shorter. And I was like, that's painfully accurate, probably. But yeah, I mean, Will Campbell regardless, he's not the longest player. The wingspan is below average. And you watch his tape, and I think it's easy to come to the conclusion that he's the best offensive lineman in this draft. And so it's a disconnect of, all right, do we just trust the tape? I mean, he plays in the SEC. It's not like we're talking about small school here, and he's been doing it since the day he showed up in Baton Rouge. Or are we going to really stay dedicated to these thresholds of length and certain? I mean, it's certainly worth the conversation, but I think teams are ultimately going to come out on the side of, hey, this is a good player, and let's bet on that. And it could be as early as forward to the Patriots. Armand Membu is another guy that I'm really high on. He's a top 10 pick in my eyes. Still 20 years old, and he only played right tackle at Missouri. And I don't think it's one of those cases where he can't play left tackle. It's when he got there, he was late to football, didn't really buy into football until his junior year of high school. So it really catching up. When he got to Missouri, there was already a left tackle there. So they put him at right tackle, and it was one of those cases, not that he can't play left tackle, so he's a right tackle only. But it's still a projection when you have not seen him consistently take those left tackle snaps. It was a bummer. Membu had to bow out of the Senior Bowl. He got sick and was violently ill and had to pull out of it, unfortunately. So we still don't have those left tackle snaps. So it's a little bit of leap of faith with him. But to your overall point, this is a tackle class with some talent, but maybe more questions than answers. And so there's definitely some concerns that it's going to take a little bit of leap of faith with some of these tackles. But like we said, 32 teams are looking for tackle depth, right? So we're still going to see these guys go with Campbell and Membu, Josh Simmons from Ohio State coming off a patella injury with his knee. Some of his interviews didn't go great, but he's really talented. In terms of pure talent, he's in the conversation to be OT1 in this class. Josh Connerly from Oregon is, I think, an ascending player. The jump he made from his freshman year to his sophomore year, and then last year to his junior year at left tackle for Oregon was really impressive. So he's in that first round mix. I mentioned Ursery, and then I think this tackle class just isn't as maybe set in stone, or there's more questions than I think ideally you want. But teams need these guys, and so it's not going to stop them from drafting them.
Right. Now you mentioned we talked about Abdul Carter, but let's talk a little bit more about the defensive side of the football here, and specifically these edge defenders. You mentioned that Abdul Carter probably still worthy of being taken before we talk about a quarterback like Shedeur Sanders. So 3 to the New York Giants potentially.
Mm-hmm.
But when we move beyond specifically Abdul Carter, how does the rest of this edge class look? You mentioned the name Landon Jackson, late first round out of Arkansas. It's interesting. I just pulled up my Ryan McChrystal, who works at my site and does mock drafts for us. And he, just like you, has Landon Jackson to the Buffalo Bills at pick number 30 late in the first round. So some nice eye to eye between both of you guys. A little mini consensus there on Landon Jackson late first round. But the rest of this edge class, how did they stack up?
Yeah, it's kind of like the tackle class, where there's definitely a few of these guys and really talented, but you could poke holes in them. And we mentioned Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M. You just don't see guys that are this size that can move like that. The burst off the ball, seeing it up close in person at the Senior Bowl was just like, wow, okay, that guy that size is able to get that burst and win angles with that speed. Really impressive. And so, okay, why do you only have 1.5 sacks last year? What do we do with that information? And I think part of it is not being a great backfield finisher. Like, even though he had only 1.5 sacks, he led A&M, which is a really strong defensive line team, front seven team. He led that defense in pressures. So he was getting to the quarterback, or he was affecting the pocket. He just wasn't able to get home consistently. And so being a better finisher in the pocket is a big thing for him. And he's still very young. I mean, a lot of these guys are very young. One of the more intriguing prospects in this draft is going to be Jalen Walker from Georgia. And where do you play him? Is he going to be an edge player in the NFL? Is he a true off-ball linebacker? Because when I studied him, the things that he did the best was getting after the quarterback. He was much better going after the quarterback than he was dropping in space and coverage. So for me, he's an edge rusher in this class. I think just in pure talent, it's off the charts. Leadership's off the charts with him too. I think the intangibles are going to help him. His dad, longtime college coach, defensive coordinator at Coastal Carolina for a lot of years. So, I mean, he grew up around the game. He grew up with a coach for a dad. He knows how this works. But I think watching him on that Georgia film, what he did best was when he was able to pin his ears back and go. And I think, you think about Hassan Reddick or Nolan Smith, some of these guys that may be a little bit undersized, but they're shot out of a cannon and they really know how to get after the quarterback. Jalen Walker can be in that same type of mold where you can compare him just to Mikael Williams, their pass rush snaps. Jalen Walker had a much higher winning percentage of getting to the quarterback compared to Mikael Williams, who is more of a true hand on the ground defensive end. So there's a lot of differing opinions on Jalen Walker. Hybrid linebacker, stand him up. What are you doing with him? But I think teams are going to be more than willing to roll the dice and say, look, the talent's there. That's why we pay our coaches all this money. Let's figure it out. And so whether it's the Panthers at 8 or the 49ers at 11 or the Falcons at 15, wherever Jalen Walker ends up going, I think a team's getting a really good player.
Excellent. Yeah, I was just going to ask you where you thought the top of his market is. 8 at the Panthers makes a lot of sense. Now let's talk about the cornerback class. Obviously, you got Travis Hunter, who very likely is the best player in the draft, most talented, in your opinion. Is this a strong corner group this year? Is it a bad year to be a corner needy team this draft?
I would say average. I mean, usually corner is one of the stronger positions every year, if we're honest, just because there's so many of these guys. Same thing with receiver. It's usually receiver and corner, the most drafted positions each and every year. And so just by the fact that there's more of those guys, there's more talent at those positions. This year, I would say it's lighter than usual. It's still a decent class. It's just not as, especially at the top, it's not as top heavy and maybe not quite as deep as we're used to seeing, but it's still a good group. After Travis Hunter, Will Johnson from Michigan's a really interesting player because you go based off of his 2023 tape and you're like, all right, this is a top 10 pick. But one of the big questions about him, okay, this year played only 6 games, banged up quite a bit. Some scouts were really questioning, all right, well, why didn't he come back? Was he making business decisions out there? Okay, and once he comes to the NFL, is that what he's going to do? Make business decisions? The other thing is how fast is he? The 40-yard dash is, something we can debate a different time, just in terms of the validity and all that. But corner is a stopwatch position. NFL teams care about what you have in the 40-yard dash. And yes, we have GPS numbers and all of that, but still they want a 40-yard dash on you. And we don't have a 40-yard dash for Will Johnson. Now, he's supposedly going to have a private workout for teams here coming up before the draft. Time will tell if he actually runs a 40 there. I'd be surprised if he does. I mean, he'd probably never run a 40 the rest of his life, but he's still a good player. He has good tape. And so I think at some point in the first round, you just trust that. And that might be the mid-first round. It could be as high as 11 to the 49ers. It could be he could fall to the mid-20s. There's a lot of wide-ranging opinions on him. And then Shedeur Barron from Texas, another guy that could go in that first round. Teams are split on him as well, just because, yes, he played across the secondary at Texas. And that's kind of the appeal with him, is that versatility. But a lot of teams don't believe he can play on the outside. They think he's a nickel only or maybe even a safety. And so just he's not a long player, size is average, good athlete. But they just question, can he really play outside as an outside corner? And so that's where the disconnect is with teams on Shedeur Barron, is they don't, maybe not all teams see the versatility with him, but some teams really do love him. So it'll be Will Johnson and Barron, 2 guys that are talented, have some question marks, but there's a lot of differing opinions on them, which will make it interesting where they're going to end up on draft weekend.
Now, obviously, you spend a ton of time with your, focus in on the different players, your scouting, your analysis, watching the tape and that sort of thing. But you also have your ear to the ground, listening into rumors and things of that nature. We got a couple of players this year with some questionable off-field issues, whether it's James Pierce Jr., Luther Burden is a couple that come to mind. Do you think any of their issues might keep them out of the first round?
I think it's possible with both those guys. Pierce, I think the way a scout described it to me is, and this is the scout talking. He said, I just want to be convinced he loves this. And I think that's the question mark with him, is does he really care enough about football to maximize, because he has first round talent. I don't think there's any debate about that. does he have enough of a passion for it where he's going to get everything out of that talent? That's where teams are just kind of they question it, and it really worries them. And so, could he fall out of the first round altogether? Yeah, I think it's definitely possible. I think it's also possible he still goes first round because again, the talent is so intriguing, and he plays the right position that a team's going to look at it and say, "We'll take our chances because we know how explosive he is." As long as we can get him on the field in a position to just pin his ears back and go, you know what, he can end up being an asset for us. So I wouldn't be surprised either way if we see Pierce go in the first round or we see him fall a little bit. Burden is a little more I've heard. I guess I'm not as concerned with the off the field stuff. It's something you hear about, but not something that I've heard teams say, it would stop them from drafting him. I think it's more on the field. Like, okay, are you a true outside the numbers receiver, or are you going to be more of a Deebo Samuel type where we need you to, run shallow routes and be just a strictly yards after catch? I mean, he has on film the ability to win deep and be more than that, but I don't think all NFL teams are 100% convinced about that. So, he's just a certain type of receiver, and that's how he was used. The production wasn't great this past year at Missouri. But I think when it's all said and done, the talent is the talent, and a team it might not be till the 30s in the early second round, but I think a team's going to get a good player with Luther Burden.
Excellent. Well, Dane, thank you so much for spending an hour with us talking to everybody about some of the players and the prospects in this year's draft class. Reminder, make sure that you guys are following Dane on social. He's over on X, DP Brugler, Brugler. Make sure you follow Dane over there. Of course, you can hear him talking, how passionate he is, how knowledgeable he is, the days, the weeks, the months, all the way back to almost 12 months when he first put on some tape last year, has certainly paid off and shown. And his Beast draft guide is out right now up at The Athletic. So make sure you guys head over to The Athletic at some point today to go and check that out. Reminder, they have a microsite this year. So not only do you get the PDF if you want, but you can go play around on the microsite, which is brand new this upcoming season. And then the last thing I want to add to this is I know from writing my book that the book is obviously great heading into the NFL season, but it's still a great resource during the season. Yeah. For you, Dane, this draft guide is great leading into the draft for people to just read up on some of these different prospects and your opinions based upon the months of putting in the work. However, it's also equally as great and as important after the draft, because then you can actually see the players that your team selected, read more about them, and then the teams are then signing guys after the draft as free agents after the draft is concluded. And that's really what teams are focused on for the next 2-3 days. And you can read up on the guys that they're signing that they didn't end up drafting. And so it's all very valuable and very important. And you can get all that great stuff from Dane over at The Athletic right now. We're really excited to bring it to you. So Dane, once again, congratulations. Go and enjoy the evening with your family once you're done doing your whirlwind media tour. You certainly deserved a little bit of time off here, and I'm sure you're really excited for the NFL draft.
I am. No, I really appreciate the time. Thank you for having me. Thank you for all the kind words. It feels good to be able to share it with everybody and talk with you today. So big fan of yours, Warren, and I really enjoyed it.
All right, Dane Brugler from The Athletic. Go check him out. Check out his draft guide, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Go,